I want to talk about yoga. I've been a practicing yogi since I was 18. I'm now in my 7th decade, and I definitely follow the tenets of yoga, the yoga philosophy of ahimsa, causing no harm, and paying attention to your actions and where they will lead you. Basically, the ancient philosophy of yoga, which goes back about 2,500 years, was based on a state of being, a philosophy about learning about your mind and how it controls your whole life and the outcome of different actions created by thoughts. But somewhere along the line, it became more of a physical practice, although it's only one of the limbs of yoga. There are 8 limbs of yoga. And now it's really so much become about this physical practice and stretching and, of course, breathing. A lot of these yoga poses that people do are actually not ancient at all, and most of them came from Western physicality and are maybe 100, 120 years old. So it's important that we examine these poses and what they're doing and pay attention to the outcome as the ancient yogis advise us to do. Yoga is not regulated. The injuries are not being kept track, really, although I've been doing a yoga injury survey for a few years, and I will be publishing that data soon. So if you want to, go to yogainjuries.com to take a survey if you have injuries. Okay, so going back to how did this all happen and how is yoga based on Western physicality? When I say yoga, I'm talking about yoga poses. The Industrial Revolution created a whole new culture where people didn't have to do as much physical labor. Man suddenly had free time. Well, the religious faction of our culture was not necessarily pleased with that because they thought that man, without the hard physical labor and toil, might fall into moral and emotional and spiritual decay. So the YMCA was one of the first religious organizations to start something called Body, Mind, Spirit Trilogy, and they went into India with the YMCA, and it definitely influenced people like Krishnamacharya, some of the what are called the fathers of modern yoga. But there was also a huge cultural movement all throughout Europe around the turn of the century. There was something called muscular Christianity, there was spiritual calisthenics, and people weren't wearing big baggy clothes anymore, especially women, and they began to want to look better and do exercises so that their body was more muscular and strong and more attractive. So there was a big movement to combine religion with physicality. Nobody really does muscular Christianity or spiritual calisthenics anymore, but what endured is the physical practice of yoga and stretching. What is not widely known, though, is that many of these exercises that the yogis from India, Iyengar, Krishnamacharya, some of the other ones, pulled in were based on Western physicality. Things like standing with your feet together and your hands like this and your chin drawn in. This is straight out of Western military drills. This is not something that the ancient yogis would have recommended because they were not about any sort of harm or ahimsa to the body. Jumping into push-ups, sun salutation. Sun salutations were developed by the Indian government, I think in the mid-40s, to get people moving more and get people more physical. Sun salutations are not ancient. And Pattabhi Jois, who helped start the Ashtanga movement here, he kept claiming that the original Ashtanga forms were on some scroll that were found in a temple that was, I don't know, 1,000 years old or something, but no one ever saw the scroll, and he claimed it was eaten by ants. And his whole character is not the greatest. Okay, I'm one of the people that he molested, and he did it to quite a few people. There's a book about it called Practice and All Is Coming. So there's some dubious characters in the yoga world. And what I'm asking you to do is really consider these yoga poses and whether or not they're actually beneficial, especially since they're based on Western physicality. I'm not talking about yoga philosophy, which I follow and I agree with, and it's very non-religious. There is no dogma in it. The Hinduism got pulled into it somewhere along the line, but there was no Hinduism in the original yoga texts. So what I figured out, and I started over 30 years ago, is that a lot of these yoga poses that we all believed were old actually can cause a lot of harm. And that's because it's based on the idea that you want to make your spine as flexible as possible. Well, it turns out the people with the most pain have the most flexible spines. Trying to bend your spine this way and that way and forward and back and twist as far as you can is actually not good for your spine. You don't need to do that. And if you do that on a regular basis, you can loosen the ligaments that are needed to keep joints stable. Especially if you're one of the hypermobile people who's real good at yoga. If when you take your arm like this, if it bends past neutral and or this 180 and it goes down, that's a sign. If you take your hand and let it droop and you can pull your thumb towards your forearm easily, or you can easily touch your toes without bending your knees, or if you stand with your knees pushed back, all of these are signs that you're hypermobile, which means your collagen, which most of your body is made of collagen, is not that strong and durable. It's looser. People that have hypermobility are really good at stretching, but it turns out it's not good for you when you're hypermobile because you don't want to make your joints any looser than they already are. If you have hypermobility, you're 14 to 16 times more likely to have anxiety, depression, stomach disorders, fibromyalgia. Something like 65% of people with scoliosis are hypermobile. So this hypermobility is a real issue, but unfortunately yoga has glamorized flexibility so much that if you happen to be hypermobile, it puts you in a dangerous situation where they're glamorizing flexibility. Now, what I teach with my yoga line and my fit align practices, and as a body worker, I've got 30 years into this. I've worked with thousands of people and helped them stabilize their joints, get out of pain, get really core strength. But it's not by stretching or pulling your belly in. And it's not by trying to pull your limbs away from your body. And the problem with a lot of stretching, not just yoga, is everyone's trying to like pull their arms up, and you don't want to do that. You want to connect your limbs to your body and learn how to move from core center. But it's not done by stretching. It's done by pandiculation. I am really excited to show you how easy it is to go back, turn on your primal patterns, and not have to stretch or exercise. Like, I don't have to kick my cats or my dogs out of my studio in the morning because they're in there working out. Animals don't work out, they just move. We need to get back to that and stop trying to force our body into unnatural positions. Stop trying to hold our belly in and do all these things that actually override the way our biointelligence, the way our natural, primal, instinctual movement patterns work. And it's a lot of fun to do this. It doesn't involve suffering to feel good. So check out my websites. I've made many online videos. I also do trainings, and I'm excited to show you what I've created from this little island of Kauai where I've lived since 1983 and spent decades trying to figure out, why are people in pain? Is this stretching actually helping? And who came up with these yoga poses anyway? I urge you to question everything and use the discernment that the ancient yogis recommended, that we always pay attention and consider the outcomes. Yoga philosophy is deep and it's transforming, but it's not about touching your toes or doing triangle or breath of fire and all of these things. It's not about that. It's a state of being. It's not a doing. There's just so many people that are putting themselves through these routines and stretches that the nervous system actually feels like it's being attacked. Really question everything and take a lot of walks and swimming. You don't have to torture yourself to feel good. Aloha from Kauai, the little island that could.